Here's something that will make you uncomfortable. Your most reliable employees, the ones who never complain, never push back, never create drama, they might actually be your biggest performance risk. Not because they're bad at their jobs, but because they've learned that speaking up doesn't change anything. And if you're a leader listening to this, that silence that you think is professionalism, it might be costing you more than you realize. If you've ever wondered why engagement scores don't match productivity or why your best people seem to just fade, then this episode will make some things very clear. Hey, you. Welcome back to It's Time to Soar. I am Coach Katina, and this is season 3 from Unstuck to Undeniable. And today we're talking about the most expensive sound in your organization: silence. So let me tell you what the real cost of that silence is. If you're an individual and you found yourself being silent, it's probably because you've internally become resentful, but externally compliant. What do I mean? You're compliant and it looks like you're just kind of towing the line, but inside you resent that, because think about it. You've got ideas, you've got thoughts, you've got things that you want to bring to the table. In fact, that's why you were hired. You were hired because of your innovation, your change. Nobody hires somebody to just toe the line. They're thinking, I hired you because you bring something to the table. Now, if what you've brought to the table has been voiced and nothing ever changed, that can cause you to become internally resentful. But on the outside, you're there, but you've kind of checked out. And you may even have started planning your exit, truth be told. Like mentally first. Like mentally you're checking out and you're just doing things and not really speaking up. But then literally starting to look on the job board, starting to talk to recruiters and entertain things and ideas and opportunities that you might not have even thought of or considered. So for the organization, the cost is people don't start giving you the warning signals about problems. I mean, like, heads up, something's coming down the pike, something might be interesting that we need to look at to avoid, to mitigate risk, but instead you don't get those warning signals because when they've spoken up before, nothing was done. And then innovation dies, creativity, because innovation hasn't been rewarded or awarded. Someone with great ideas or teams with new ways of doing things have been giving the silent or mental nod that says, if it's not broke, why fix it? So they're quiet. So what you've now done is the cost of your organization is you're not getting those innovative ideas. You're not getting those thoughts. You're not getting those processes that could change and improve how you're already doing things. And last but not least, it's costly because now your culture has become performative instead of productive. So it looks good on the outside and things look like they're going well, but have you really checked, and are you productive? And here's the part most leaders miss. When your people choose silence to stay safe, you're not getting their best thinking, you're getting their safe thinking. And in a competitive market, you get left behind because other organizations are trying to come up with the most innovative, the most creative, the most cost savings way to beat you. And if you are rewarding silence or not listening to the innovative voice, the troubleshooting voice, then you will be getting left behind. That's the cost to the organization. Gallup research shows that managers account for 70% of the variance in employee engagement. Managers. And I know that a lot of times it looks like it's the people, but Gallup shows that it's 70% on the manager. And what that really means is when people fail to speak honestly, or they feel that they're not safe speaking honestly, they don't just become less engaged, they become less truthful. They begin to tell you what you want to hear. And do you want what you want to hear, or do you want what you need to hear? Do you want what's going to improve the productivity, or do you want the status quo? because nobody wants to celebrate last year's numbers. That's like everybody gets a trophy. You participated, you showed up. I don't want to just show up, I want to win. And I'm wondering if you want your team, and your organization to win. So they stop bringing you the problems. If you would have heard of, how many of you have had an instance where if you would have heard of this problem, and it's like hindsight is 2020. If you would have heard of the problem months, weeks prior to when you actually saw the problem, how much money could you have saved? How much time could you have saved? And how much headache could you have avoided? Just a question. And so when you've got an employee that is safe because they don't feel safe sharing their ideas, eventually they stop caring about the outcomes that they can't influence. So all of the incentives to make the numbers don't mean anything if their input doesn't really impact the output. That's not an attitude problem, which it's often labeled as. My team is disengaged. My team is disgruntled. My team doesn't seem to work well together. All of the things, but it's not an attitude problem. That's a leadership environment problem. So I'm asking this quick question. What is the leadership environment around your teams, around your organization? And is it conducive, open, amenable to voices, to ideas, to thoughts, to innovation? I once worked with a leader who was not open to feedback. And so let me back up. This leader joined the organization, and there was a group already in motion. And the previous leader had an open policy, open door policy. There were less levels in hierarchy, and it didn't feel so rigid. It was conducive to innovation and ideas. So people felt free to speak up. But when this new leader came, while everyone was, of course, apprehensive because there's a new leader coming, this new leader had a different mindset and leadership style. Okay, we get that. Different leadership style is one thing. However, this leadership style, it was not open to innovation. They came in with ideas where they were going to make some changes and some improvements. And what I love is that he studied what was going on. He studied the gaps and was excited about his ideas that he wanted to implement, and even excited about the team that he had because he could see the skills on paper. But within 3 months, morale started to decline, engagement started to decline, and the numbers slipped. So the productivity slipped, and he didn't understand why. So in our assessment, we discovered that over the first 3 months, there was a drop in the participation in the meetings, where people used to be excited to go and share what their sub departments and subgroups were doing. Instead, there was a decline in morale, there was a decline in engagement, and what through interview. Now by 6 months, we're now doing interviews and asking what's going on, give us some feedback, what the challenges were. And what we found was that they didn't feel like their ideas fit anymore. At first, it was just like, maybe the organization is going in a different direction, and I feel like the things that I'm thinking don't line up with the direction where we're going. And what it was it wasn't about that their ideas didn't line up with the direction where the organization wanted to go. It was that the communication wasn't happening and people didn't feel safe sharing their ideas because there was a blatant gap between where they felt we should head, or ideas they felt that should be implemented, versus what was brought to the table by our leader. And so not only did people start jumping ship by month 12, our numbers were so bad that that leader had to be replaced. And in hindsight, we lost a lot of good talent. We lost a lot of innovation, and we had catch up to play. And I was leading the training department at that time. And so my work was double, tripled. And what we found, that it wasn't about skill, it was about culture. And we needed to shift back to an open culture that allowed for ideas to be vetted, communicated, shared in a safe space. And we had to recreate that. So I'm wondering, is there anybody out there that ever had leadership shifts, or maybe there was an organization where the culture definitely was not open to your voice? And tell in the comments, what did that do for you? How did you approach your job? Did it impact how much you spoke up? And even, was there a long lasting impact? We'll talk about that a little later, but I wonder if there was a long lasting impact if you happen to be in an environment that was like that. Go ahead and just type it in the notes. If you're just listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So you can find us on YouTube, just to type in your comments. And what I have encountered is working with some leaders who actually had challenges months after being in that type of environment, where they had to find their voice again, and they had to get to a place where they felt safe enough to share. So when we reviewed the numbers at this organization where I was working with, this leader that came in and swiftly changed the culture. And he, I know it takes a while for culture to drift, but there was such kind of like a visceral reaction to anything that was brought up that wasn't the leader's ideas, or seemed, in fact, he made it feel like it was disrespectful, dishonorable, or inappropriate to even speak out and share other ideas. So there was a quick and rapid decline in the culture. And when we look back at the results, what we found out was, not only was there disengagement within the organization, but the numbers did not match. The productivity was flat. We were being beaten out by the competition. We were not winning. And this is the 18 to 24 month post analysis, just looking at the data and the trends. And like I said, we lost two of our top performers, and they went to competitive organizations. And so, where the leader thought that he had a motivation problem, he did, but it was a demotivation problem. It was because his communication style and the culture that he created that challenge, that problem. And so people, they just checked out. So here's the reframe that I wish he had been open to, because here's the reframe that changes everything. When you think about silence, silence is not neutral. Silence always serves someone. And if your people are choosing silence, you have to ask yourself, what is this silence protecting? And if it's you and you're choosing silence, what is the silence protecting? Because silence serves someone. It protects something, someone. And so, is it protecting people from conflict? Is it protecting them from uncomfortable truths? Is it protecting you from uncomfortable truth? Is it protecting a system that really does need to be challenged? Because here's what I know from experience in leadership development. Your voice doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be confrontational. It doesn't need to be negative. It just needs to be clear. And if you lead others, your environment determines whether people use their voice at all. If you've already read my book, It's Time to SOAR. If you haven't, there's a link in the show notes. If you've read my book, It's Time to SOAR, you'll notice that there's a chapter in it called Being Stuck on Right. And early in my leadership journey, I struggled with being stuck on right. And the book talks about where that came from. But once I identified that I had a struggle with that, what I realized was, when feedback came, I became defensive, because I took feedback or ideas or other innovation as if I was failing. I took it as if I was doing something wrong, or I was going to be found out that I didn't really have all the answers, or that I wasn't the greatest leader that I should have been. And that was ridiculous, but it was grounded in an untruth that I had to go unpack. I had to address, I had to reframe in order to move forward and be open to ideas, innovation, constructive feedback, all of that. And let me tell you what it cost me. It cost me great ideas with my projects. It cost me time where I wasn't able to make the deadlines that I always wanted to make. It cost me some relationships in groups. I had small teams under me that weren't performing at their top because I was afraid to let them share. I didn't realize that I was creating an environment where they weren't they weren't confident in sharing. They felt like all the ideas that they had given were not producing any fruit. They weren't being used, they weren't being heard, and they shut down. Some of them quietly quit, and I missed them. The project missed them. And until I addressed that I was the problem, the bottleneck, the challenge, it didn't get any better. So, what did I do? Like I said, I had to personally go back. I had to first identify that it was me, that I was struggling with feedback. I was struggling with other ideas, and I had to learn to value the team that was placed around me. And that was a hard truth for me to come to. I'll be honest. And then I look back in my past, and then I couldn't unsee it. And so I had to go back. I had to do the work. And this is now the work that I do. I help other leaders identify any invisible snags that are keeping them and their teams from being productive, from being very, very engaging and moving projects, organizations forward and getting better results. So that's the work that I now do, and I'm passionate about it because I remember what it felt like to look back and realize that I had a snag, something that was keeping me back, keeping my teams back. And until I did that work, my teams were not productive. And I did that work, and I got open to feedback, open to communication, open to testing the environment, hearing and asking for feedback. What does this feel like? Do you feel comfortable and confident sharing your ideas? This is what we've heard. This is what we're working on, giving that feedback. And I may be speaking your language. So if it's you that's been in an environment where it hasn't been conducive to sharing your voice, opening up, sharing your ideas, sharing your innovation, and maybe it's your manager that needs that help. Or if you've been that manager, if you've been that leader, this is the work that I do. Reach out to me so we can talk. Let's assess where you are and help you stop being the bottleneck so that next levels can be reached and there can be collaboration, there can be engagement, and there can be stronger results. So here's a couple practical steps for you as an individual. If you've been silent, I want you to start noticing where you self-censor, where you would say something and you fail to speak up. Identify which values of yours feel compromised. What is it that it feels like you're giving up? And then choose one area where comfort is being misplaced. Choose one place where clarity matters more than comfort, where it might be uncomfortable, but you can identify, I really need to be clear here, even if it's uncomfortable. For leaders, if you're a leader and you sense that this might be happening, I want you to ask, what might my team not be telling me? And then create specific opportunities for honest feedback. Reward truth telling. One thing that I've done is I've brought up something that someone shared for me, and hear me. One of my leaders said, you never are transparent. You never disclose. It shows weakness. No, it opens the room for feedback. So I have shared such and such gave me, or it's person A gave me this feedback. I didn't realize that this was impacting the project. And so this is what I've done to change it, to correct it, to course correct. Reward that truth telling, even when it's inconvenient, even when it might be uncomfortable, because it opens the room, it opens the table, and it sets you up for success because now people feel more open to share their ideas. You don't need to say everything, but you can't keep not saying anything. So that transparency, it helps and it goes a long way. So here's what every leader needs to understand. Disengaged employees don't quit loudly. They quit quietly. They may keep coming to work and stay physically while mentally checking out. And they do the minimum. If they've checked out, they are definitely doing the minimum. And they're probably planning their next move. They stop volunteering ideas. They stop engaging in troubleshooting, and they stop and are only fulfilling the basic requirements. And by the time you notice the engagement problem, you've already lost months or years of productivity and their best contributions. Sometimes it's hard to bring them back. The organizations that win are the ones that create cultures where people speak up. They feel that their voice is heard. They feel that they're able to speak up early, often, and honestly. And so I would encourage you to create spaces for people to speak up early, to speak up often, and to speak up honestly, and reward that. So I want to ask a couple of questions for you to answer. If you're the one that finds yourself being silent, ask yourself, where has silence kept me safe, but also kept me small? I want you to ask yourself that because you weren't created small. You weren't created with all those ideas, the innovation, the great concepts you can bring to the table just for you to stay small. So think about it. Where has your silence kept you safe, but also kept you small? And to all the leaders that are out there, I ask you to ask yourself, where might my environment be unintentionally rewarding silence instead of clarity? It is inadvertently saying, I'd rather for you to just be compliant than to be clear about what's going on, any risks we might be avoiding, we need to avoid, etc. So where might my environment be rewarding silence instead of clarity? And to executives that are listening, I want you to ask yourself, what is my culture of silence costing me in innovation, early problem detection, and talent retention? Who am I losing because the environment doesn't reward their voice? If this episode caused you to realize that your silence has been costing you more than you thought, then that awareness is worth more to you than you know. For leaders, if you see hesitation where you need ownership, disengagement where you need that innovation, or compliance where you don't want them to just toe the line and be compliant, but you need more commitment, that's not a people problem. That's a leadership capability gap. And those gaps have measurable costs: retention, productivity, quality of decision. And not only that, the competitive advantage. That's exactly the work that I do with organizations. I come in and I help the leaders to help their teams engage more. I help the leaders to lead in a way that teams feel safe, teams feel engaged, teams are innovative, and they increase their productivity. That's the work that I do. For professionals, I help you stop negotiating your values and start leading with clarity and alignment. It's time for you to find your voice and use it. That's where the individual coaching comes in, and we get to breakthrough. The next step is simple. Whether it's a need to come in and help your leaders lead better, if it's you, the leader, that needs a coach to help you create an environment where it's conducive to innovation, better results, and engagement, or whether you just want help assessing where you are within your organization and what next steps can be, the next step is simple. Reach out to me. The link is in the show notes. Schedule a session. Let's strategically walk through what is currently the challenge and come up with a solution. Because silence might feel safe, but it's not sustainable. Hey, you, I was thinking about you. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking it's time for the silence to end, and it's time for you to soar.